All right, so I'm here with Andrew Peluso, who is the CEO and founder of Pesty Marketing and Bananas Marketing. Andrew broke down and created a framework that we're going to go through, the 40-40-20 framework. We have a presentation, and at the end of this, we're going to be giving away a template that you all can download. So, Andrew, if you want to kick this off, let's jump right into the framework.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Cool. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, that looks good.
All right, great. So the question we're trying to answer, I mean, there's a few, but the main one is, what has the biggest impact on your direct marketing efforts? How do you plan for a successful direct marketing campaign? And if it doesn't go well, how do you evaluate the reason why? And me and my team use something called the 40-40-20 framework, which is not an original idea from us, but something that we've leveraged and that I've found incredibly useful over the years. Just to give myself a little introduction, three-time agency founder, originally ran a web design or was a partner in a web design, an SEO agency. I've generated over $40 million for small business clients from SEO and SEM, and I'm currently leading a team of 10 at Pesty Marketing and Bananas Marketing. So one thing you'll notice is that at some points in this presentation, I am going to refer to the customer, the buyer, the audience, the consumer, whatever you want to call them, as Mrs. Jones. And I do this for a couple of reasons. Number one is because when it's an individual that's reading your marketing material, right? It's an individual that's reading. Your advertisement is not being seen by an audience. So it's a helpful frame of mind to be in when you're thinking about your advertising, to think of an individual, right? So your target audience may not be a Mrs. Jones, but we're just going to use that in this case. I think also it helps to humanize the customer. You know, a lot of the marketing jargon that we use are things like users, right, or consumer, and that tends to make the human behind the screen who's reading our marketing a data point, which I think can take away from both our ability to think through how we should do our marketing in a way that it touches another human. And there's also, of course, ethical gray areas when it comes to marketing. And so, for anyone who has been in those kinds of situations, this is just a really good way to think about the fact that, you're dealing with another person on the other line. So I'm going to use Mrs. Jones from time to time when I'm referring to a consumer. So like I said, we use the 40-40-20 framework to do the analysis of trying to plan and evaluate our direct marketing campaigns. So the question is, what is it? And it's broken down into three components. It's made up of the list, the offer, and creative. So this framework says that 40% of the success of any direct response campaign is based on the targeting, segmentation, and quality of the list. 40% of the success is based on how relevant and irresistible the offer is, and 20% of the success is based on the quality of the creative material and the messaging. In theory, this means that if the list is perfect and the offer is perfect, but your creative sucks, then you still have an 80% chance of success. If the list is an abomination, the offer is perfect, and your creative is perfect, then you have a 60% chance of success, and so on. So let's break down each of these components, starting with the list. The list is made up of the targeting, segmentation, and quality of the people you are getting in front of. Here I've outlined a couple of examples of how you might break down the targeting, segmentation, and quality. Using Google Search Ads, you would start with bottom of the funnel keywords. You would further segment the list by focusing on a specific location. And lastly, you would improve the quality of the list by feeding Google conversion data. Using Facebook, you might target a specific demographic of people. You would segment the audience by focusing on people who recently made a similar purchase to what you're advertising. And you improve the quality of the list by, again, feeding Facebook conversion data. So to get more specific, you could use Google to target people who are searching for pest control near me. You would segment the list by focusing on people who live in Austin, Texas, and you would improve the quality of your list by acquiring 15 conversions within a 30-day time frame and tracking that data using Google Ads. On Facebook, you might target men aged 35 to 45 on Facebook who have purchased hiking gear on Facebook recently and would improve the list after getting 50 conversions in 1 week, right? And so there's lots of ways you can slice and dice this. You could have chosen something else for quality if you're talking about a cold audience, and also, obviously, all of this is only focusing on digital marketing. There's also offline direct marketing campaigns. But there's so much data that we don't have control of that's on the back end and that's leveraged by, the algorithms that Google and Facebook have. So, I find, just like I think any marketer does, after you have good sales and conversion data, the quality of your list goes up dramatically. The key to a high quality list is narrowing in on people who have a clear intent to purchase. You want to get your ad in front of people who desire what you are selling. Next, let's look at the offer. And as a reminder, 40% of the success of your direct response marketing is based on how relevant and irresistible your offer is. And this is where I see most businesses fail. There are many frameworks for creating an offer. Here is, a useful one. Value, positioning, price, guarantees, urgency, scarcity, offer stacking, and naming are all levers you can pull to improve your offer. So starting with the value. What value does your solution offer? Your benefit should be well understood and clearly communicated in your offer. How is your solution positioned in Mrs. Jones' mind? As an example, Celsius, the energy drink, has been around since 2004, but you only heard about them in the last few years. Part of the reason for that is that in 2016, they went from being a brand focused on burning calories and losing weight to a more feminine feeling healthy alternative to other more masculine energy drinks. Same ingredients, different positioning, and it's been a huge success. Price is another lever, but lower price doesn't always mean more sales. What's his name? There's a story from a famous investor. This is so funny. It's like totally escaping me right now. Who talks about, Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger tells a story where he says, pricing, the effect of pricing and increasing pricing actually helped his friend Bill Ballhaus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Oops. When Bill was head of Beckman Instruments, it produced some complicated product where if it failed, it caused enormous damage to the purchaser. It wasn't a pump at the bottom of an oil well, but that's a good mental example. And he realized that the reason this thing was selling so poorly, even though it was better than anybody else's product, was because it was priced lower. It made people think it was a low quality gizmo. So he raised the price by 20% or so, and the volume went way up. Another lever to pull is the guarantee. People always hate to lose. They hate to feel stupid. They hate to make bad decisions or waste money. Bottom line is they hate to take risks. When it comes to closing sales, you are that risk. In every transaction, the purchaser is taking on some risk. What if this doesn't work as promised? What if it doesn't meet their needs? What if purchasing from you is a waste of money? These questions are always in the back of your prospect's mind, Mrs. Jones, as she's considering purchasing from you. And if you don't eliminate those risks, it's very likely they'll ruin the sale. Risk reversal, which is what a guarantee tries to do, is a strategy that transfers some or all of the risk of a transaction from the buyer to the seller. Instead of making the purchaser shoulder the risk of a bad transaction, the seller agrees in advance to make things right if, for whatever reason, things don't turn out as the purchaser expected. The next lever is urgency. This is the psychological lever of limiting time and establishing deadlines for products or services that are available for purchase. Black Friday is the most well-known example of this. Scarcity. This is creating FOMO. the fear of missing out, or the psychological lever of limiting the supply or quantity of products or services that are available for purchase. Luxury goods often leverage this. Diamonds used to be the pinnacle of scarcity marketing. Offer stacking. A single offer is less valuable than the same offer broken into its component parts and stacked as bonuses. On infomercials, this is the "but wait, there's more" part. It sounds terribly cheesy on TV, but it does work. The final piece of packaging your offer makes it an exclusive deal that Mrs. Jones can only get from you. She can't get this if she goes anywhere else. So by taking all of those different components of your offer and putting a bow on it with a nice name that is specific to your business, you've made it so that Mrs. Jones can't, if she goes and looks at trying to get the same deal somewhere else, she may be able to piece together something that's similar, but because of all these different components that you've put together in this particular way and then given it a specific name, it feels like she can only get what you're offering from you and not anywhere else. Lastly, let's talk about creative. 20% of the success is based on the quality of the creative material and the messaging. Creative is made up of the copy, the design, and the format. According to a study by one of the leading landing page software, Unbounce, and leading CRM tool, HubSpot, copy is more important than design as it relates to conversion rate. In fact, copy has twice the relative importance when compared to design. Great copy comes from knowing your customer and your product or service. The better you understand both, the better your copy can be. Find out how customers think about your kind of product, what language they use when they discuss the subject, what attributes are important to them, and what promise would be most likely to make them buy your brand. Study the product or service you are going to advertise. The more you know about it, the more likely you are to come up with a big idea for selling it. The job of the design, and therefore the designer, is to get the copy read. Format is the arrangement of everything, and what works in one context may not work in another, right? So one direct advertisement you have on LinkedIn may not work as effectively as what will work better on Facebook. The 40-40-20 framework is not without its limitations. When the reputation of a company is far ahead of its competition, in this case, you can offer the same thing, or your offer can even be less enticing than your competition, and you can still get great results. If you have 500 reviews on your Google business profile and your nearest competitor has 30, and you both have a 4.9 star rating, the company with 500 reviews can charge more or offer less for the price. I had a client who charged 20% more for the exact same thing, but we had hundreds of reviews and dozens more coming in each month, and their nearest competitor had just over 100 reviews with very few coming in, and our client could get away with charging a lot more because of it. Right, so this is just an example I pulled when I typed in pest control near me in Austin. There's clearly very different trust and credibility built into these three options, right? The number one option with 909 reviews and a 5-star rating, the number two option with 57 reviews and a 4.9 star ratings, and then the last one with only 9 reviews. You're more likely to trust the company that has a lot of reviews. I will say that the one part about this that will make people skeptical is the 5.0 star rating. I have seen quite a bit of research that shows that if you have a perfect rating, people and a certain psychographic of people in particular aren't going to trust that your reviews are honest, that you might be gating your reviews or that some of your reviews might be fake. So this also can work against you if not done correctly. The other limitation of the 40-40-20 principle is having a strong brand versus a weak brand. When you have built a real brand, these are usually companies making $100 million plus, in my experience, and are sponsoring local sports teams, buying TV commercials, They are Goliaths, well known, and have built a lot of trust with consumers, and people buy from them because of their brand. An example of this is AG1 or Athletic Greens versus Live It Up. You've probably heard of Athletic Greens, especially if you do any kind of listening to podcasts, and you've likely never heard of Live It Up. Athletic Greens charges $80 a month. Live It Up charges $40 a month. They're essentially the same thing.
And I'm into this stuff, and I've never heard of Live It Up.
Yeah.
So that's funny. Yeah, and I definitely have seen Athletic Greens everywhere.
Yep. And that's it. That's the 40-40-20 framework in a nutshell. At the end of the document that we'll be sharing, I also have a list of resources at the end here, including where I originally heard about the 40-40-20 framework, which is from the book Over Deliver: Build a Business for a Lifetime, Playing the Long Game in Direct Response Marketing. Highly recommend that book. It's one of a handful that have been very influential in my marketing career, as well as some other resources that I have referenced throughout the presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, this is going to be really helpful, because what I see a lot is people focus on granular details inside of the ad accounts when they're trying to optimize or improve like a campaign that's not working. And a lot of times we're not taking a step back and looking at like the overall strategy and those three kind of buckets you laid out. A lot of times that's where the issue might stem. You might not have a good offer. You might not be targeting the right people. The creative might suck. So instead of just looking like inside of Google Ads or the platforms of what like micro changes we can make, I think following something like this, especially when you're building out a campaign, definitely get you thinking more of like these bigger variables that are going to have more of an impact than these small changes. Do you implement this when you're building out campaigns? Is there some kind of process you go through where you go through each of those three categories?
Yeah, so I introduce this concept to every client, and in particular when we're running a client's Google Ads or just search engine marketing account, like whether it's Bing or Google, we will reference this in every monthly meeting that we have with a client and talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and what are we currently working on to improve anything that we're unsatisfied with. So we'll specifically say, is our targeting good? Yes, we've nailed down our targeting. We've had a few months to add all the negative keywords. We continue to do so, but Google is no longer, putting us in front of a bunch of erroneous keywords that we don't want to pay for. So our targeting is on point. No issues there. And then we'll look at the offer, and this is usually like I mentioned in the presentation, the offer is where I see most companies fall short. Especially in B2B, you mostly just see things like free consultation. And that's hard to get clients to move away from because they're so scared of standing out from everyone. But I would say this is, and taking even a step further back, in addition to these three things, I'll even start by letting the client know, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of Mrs. Jones and figure out like, what is it that she is seeing when she is doing her research to figure out what company she is going to do business with. Like, have you ever even gone to Google? So Pesty Marketing, we do marketing for pest control companies exclusively. And so I might tell our potential client, like, have you ever even gone to Google and tried to see what Mrs. Jones is going to see if she looks for a pest control company in your market? Because what you'll find is that she's going to see companies like Terminix with incredible brand awareness. She's going to see other companies who are doing aggressive marketing, who are offering their first service at a steeply discounted price. And then they're going to maybe see you, but what are you doing to differentiate yourself? Because you're not Terminix. You haven't spent millions of dollars a year over the course of decades to build that kind of trust and credibility through brand building campaigns. And you're not this other company willing to give an incredibly, discounted price. So what are you doing differently? How is your offer any more enticing than someone else? Like, why would you buy from you? And if you can't give me a good reason why, based on, this framework, then you have a problem. And we have to use this framework to figure out, how we're going to improve your targeting, your offer, your creative, and ultimately your sales. The other problem I find is that when I guess our audience are mostly people working in agencies and marketers, but I'm sure a lot of clients, a lot of these guys can relate to this, which is the client usually often thinks that like they have this framework backwards. They think the creative is 80% of the work and that the targeting and the offer is like 20%. And they think that as marketers, we can just work magic and make their crappy offer somehow look and sound desirable in front of a prospect. And it's just not the case. So yeah, definitely taking a step back, putting yourself in the shoes of the person you're trying to sell to, and thinking about the macro effort that you're making rather than being really in the weeds all the time is huge. Which is also why we talk about this, and we only take on clients who give us influence in these areas, because if you only have control over a Google Ads account and you don't have any say in what the offer is, or you don't have any say in what the landing page is going to say or looks like, you're screwed. Like, you can't work in isolation and expect to get, some awesome results.
Yeah. And it's funny with offers now too, because it's definitely been popularized by like Alex Ramosi and all these different people that talk about it a lot. But a lot of businesses still don't think about it or actually implement anything, or actually think about like, how can we position what we do in a different way and actually incorporate those elements, like you mentioned, like bonuses, guarantees, all those different elements, and actually test and try that. So it's kind of interesting. It's definitely something that's being talked about more, but I still don't really see it implemented. It is difficult to do. It definitely requires the business owner's input and inside knowledge there about the industry. But I do think that's something that a lot of people would get some benefit out if they really sat and thought about. Now, the percentages I really like too, because I like how it's breaking down. This is like your percent chance of success, where even if we do a lot of these things right, there's still a percent it doesn't work. And then we have to figure out, what do we adjust? So I think thinking about it in that way is good, because a lot of times I see companies think about it as like it either works or it doesn't. And they don't think about these probabilities, like, okay, this part has this much of an impact. So that I really like. How do you measure? Because you mentioned like analyzing those three areas. Is there any metrics or anything you look at to kind of analyze if it's the creative or if it's the offer? How do you go about that, of really digging into that?
Yeah, to use like Google Ads as an example, or Bing Ads for that matter, right? So what do you have? I mean, the main KPIs that you have are click-through rate. I mean, I guess if what you also could look at is quality score, right? Does Google determine that you have good ad relevance, a good click-through rate, and a good landing page experience? So that's one component of this that we can look at, in particular as it relates to targeting, right? Because that's one of those, those things can be a low quality score. It can be an indication that your targeting is off. If your expected click-through rate or your is like below average, which oftentimes below average expected click-through rate, I guess, is kind of the norm. I'm not really sure what goes into Google deciding what's average or above average, but it's rare we get like 8 or 9 out of 10 quality scores. I guess because the market's just so saturated. But click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per lead, customer acquisition cost. I guess any of those numbers can be a proxy for is your targeting good? Click-through rate is probably the biggest one there, right? Your offer is both your click-through rate and your conversion rate, and your creative is going to be your click-through rate and your conversion rate. So there's a pretty significant amount of overlap. We try to take all those KPIs and then dig deeper, right, into what may or may not be working. But yeah, I guess click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per lead, those are the biggest things that we look at because of the space we're in.
That makes sense, and you can kind of adjust from there based on how those are doing. I like the point you mentioned about price too. I think it's another thing that doesn't get thought about enough. I don't know where I learned this from, so I can't give credit to it, but it was a similar concept where there's almost no advantage to be the second cheapest option. So if you're the second cheapest, you should immediately try to figure out how you can be the most expensive. So that concept, I think, was when I first learned that was interesting because like if you're the cheapest, you could market around that. You're going to get a certain type of customer. But then if you're in that middle area, there's almost very little like marketing or positioning impact from that. So that concept too, I think obviously that's harder to adjust with a client since there's more that kind of goes into that. But it's another thing that I feel like can impact campaigns and doesn't really get looked at or analyzed as like, is there a way we can package it differently, maybe change the pricing, have like a one-time thing and then a recurring service or however you structure it. How do you start that conversation with the client? Is it normally kind of like a brainstorm session to kind of come up with some ideas or get some of their input? What do you normally do there?
I mean, it depends. In some instances, we really don't have a lot of say over pricing unless we're talking about doing some type of offering some kind of discount. And then clients will sometimes work with us. Like we have an IT client, a managed IT services client who they're willing, right now we're running a campaign where they're going to offer 50% off the first 3 months, and that number is capped. In the case of pest control clients, because we have enough experience and enough clients in that space now, clients do give us more influence over the initial pricing because the way pest control works in terms of what you're trying to sell is you're trying to sell an annual maintenance agreement. And so that means you're selling an upfront cost for the initial service, and then you're selling a monthly price so that every other month or every few months, a pest control company will come out and service your home. And so we'll try to get clients to come down on that initial price to anywhere from like $79 we found is kind of the sweet spot. If you go lower than that, depending on the community you're targeting, you don't tend to see crazy, like much better results between $59 and $79 initial price. $79 price does beat the $99 price though. But we're not asking them to offer that first service for free, which some pest control companies do. And that's also a great offer if you want to go that route. So what we'll do is we use the offer stacking, or we'll break up the components of an offer into their individual parts. And we've seen two offers work best so far in the pest control industry in order to build up the value in the price. Because this is the other thing about the pest control industry, just like other industries, they're not very transparent about their pricing. So, they'll say get $100 off, but $100 off what? And you have to fill out a form or call to get the pricing. And we found that with our clients, we can be transparent about their pricing if we build up enough value in what they're getting for the pricing. So back to the offers that work, we have one client who crushes it by offering free termite protection. And that's something they normally charge $13 a month for. And they do that for the first year. And then once that termite protection is up, they'll go back to those customers and say, hey, your one year of termite protection is up. Do you want to continue that service for $13? And because of the psychological principle where people don't want to lose something they already have, they are significantly more likely to say yes to that offer. Whereas if you try to sell them that termite protection up front, more than likely they say no. Another offer we see work really well is similar strategy, but for mosquito control. So you offer mosquito control on the first service for free. They get a few weeks of a mosquito-free backyard, and they're like, this is awesome. And then 30 days after that initial service, you follow up and say, hey, your mosquito protection is likely worn out. Do you want to add this service on? And you try to upsell them into that. But that initial offer is usually something like a discounted first service, for a free mosquito protection, and then we add other things on there like a pest-free guarantee. We don't charge the customer to schedule their appointment, and they don't get charged until after their service has been done. So they don't need a credit card. They don't need to pull out a credit card to book the appointment. There's a lot of different things that we'll stack on. But it's tough too with pricing when you're talking about an industry like pest control or any industry where what you're selling is a commodity, because you have to find a way to communicate the value of your product better than anyone else, and you have to find a way to offer stack if you want to charge more than anyone else. And I have yet to see a company in the pest control space do that really well. And we have not cracked that code particularly, in a great way either. So we do have some clients who charge, quite a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, those are some good examples, I feel like, for local businesses and home services and different things where it's hard to come up with offers and find ways to have bonuses and all those different things. I think that was a good way to highlight that, because that's one thing I've always had difficulty with too, with local or home service or any type of local industry, is especially like you pointed out, the commodity part, where a lot of times we all just default to price. Like, okay, let's do a discount or something. I think that was a good example of having a free service that's a bonus, and then eventually you could renew that down the line. So that's something. That's
because
been
a lot
difficult.
of these small businesses, they don't think, and like they have no idea what the customer lifetime value is in their
Yeah.
company, right? They don't even. I mean, half the business owners that I talk to don't even know what that terminology means, which is crazy because that is where the money is made. So they're looking at squeezing as much juice out of the relationship in terms of profit as possible on the front end. And what they don't realize is that they have to have a much longer term perspective than they currently have. And the one who is willing to offer the most value for the service to create that relationship, and then of course deliver on that promise, is going to get the most amount of customers. And then if you're delivering on the promise, then those customers are going to stick around for the longest time. So retention is a whole other conversation, but customer lifetime value is something that we also try to talk with our clients about early on. In particular, when we're trying to convince them that they should offer something like for free, right? So when I go to a pest control client and they've never done a deal like we're packaging it for them, where we're saying you need to discount your first service to $79 as opposed to what you would normally charge, which is maybe like $119 or $129, and you also need to offer Mrs. Jones a free mosquito treatment on that first service, and all these other things. That's scary for them because they've never tried that before. So, but the key is you have to deliver on your promise and know that customer is going to stick. Like in pest control, the average customer stays with their company for 3.5 years. And so if you can extend that, right, to 4, 5, 6 years, you're talking about customer lifetime value in pest control of thousands of dollars. Like depending on what you're charging, yeah, I mean, that could be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000, right? Not to mention, that's only your annual recurring, not to mention any add-on services that they might, if you're offering like lawn care or you're offering rodent control, right? Anything else that they might add on. But it requires the business operator thinking, in the long term, in order to do that.
Yeah, that's such an important concept, because first of all, just knowing what the numbers are, your customer lifetime value, and then once you know it, then you could actually make adjustments. And then what I really like about that is when you start adding in these offers with free services and these different components, you could factor that into your customer acquisition cost. And now you could really start to see, and if you could increase lifetime value, you could then spend more to get customers, and all your competitors in your market can't, because they don't even know what their lifetime value is, or it's not high enough. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think a lot of local businesses, because their competition, depending on your market, there's some markets where there's sophisticated competition, but a lot of times just by getting an initial offer and even incorporating some of these elements, and then knowing your lifetime value, you now have all this data you can use that none of your competitors have. So you don't even need to be perfect in a lot of cases here, but then you could keep iterating and improving.
Yeah, it also depends on how you want to run your business. Like, what I've noticed in the trades is that a lot of these guys, they are okay. They want to maximize their profit from day one, and it's all about trade-offs, right? So the trade-off for that is that you are going to grow slowly. and organically. And you may build a book of business that in 10 years is worth, you know, a couple $1,000,000. And that's great. And you get to take home, you know, a really nice salary for yourself and you know, feed your family. And that's awesome. But if you want to take growth seriously, if you are trying to be one of these companies who are really trying to expand and be aggressive about your sales, then the trade-off is it's going to cost you more to acquire your customers, but you're going to be a far larger company much sooner than, you know, the guys who want to be as profitable as possible as quickly as possible.
That's a great concept too, because something I don't think about as much is like, what is the actual business owner's goals? And then is what we're doing actually aligned with that? Maybe like you said, there's no real right way to do it, which is the nice thing about this. Maybe, they would rather grow slower, maximize profit now, or maybe they're looking more, let's grow as big as possible and optimize for profit later. So I think understanding that first when you're kicking off a campaign could even feed into the actual strategy that you're putting together, where, I don't think about that as much.
And for our clients, I let them know we don't work well with the former. We work well with the company who has aggressive sales and growth goals. If you want to be as profitable as possible, as early as possible, I mean, you're just in the wrong arena. Like, you shouldn't even be talking to us about Google Ads and SEO because it's expensive. You know, doing marketing is expensive. Acquiring customers through digital marketing is expensive. You know, and it's expensive because you're competing with all those other companies who are taking growth really seriously and who are being very aggressive and who are driving the cost per click up. So we're just not a good fit because you're going to have to spend the money it takes to compete with these other, you know, grizzly bears who are out to eat your lunch.
Yeah, and that I feel like that long-term mindset where if you just launch a campaign and you're just thinking about ROI, it's like almost never going to be as efficient as it's going to be day one that it is on like day 90 or 180. So it's more of like that consistent long-term effort. And you do need business owners to align with that and believe in that concept. That's what I find as well. Like, the best kind of working relationship is someone that knows, marketing's an investment in my business in the long term, not necessarily something that I need this optimal ROI instantly. So that's a good way to qualify, I think, and find who's going to be a good fit to work together and where you could give the most impact to with your services.
Totally. Our clients are our best clients, and the ones who we get the best results for are the ones who recognize marketing is not ROI positive from day one. Like, they're willing and capable of losing money. You know, so at this point, when we get leads, I tell them pretty early on that we only take on clients who are making, you know, at least a couple million a year in revenue. Because if you're not making at least a couple million a year in revenue, then you can't afford the kind of marketing that we need to do for you to accelerate results. You know, maybe there are other there are other agencies out there who you know, do it differently, but in our experience, our sweet spot really has been companies who do $2 to $15 million a year in revenue, and when they're around that $10 million a year mark is when we can really you know, put fuel on the fire, and they get super excited about what we accomplish for them because we can invest the way we need to drive results for them.
Yeah, no cutting corners. What I find is, like, with smaller companies or companies that are just getting started, they almost need to learn how to do some of it themselves just to get things going and get to the point where they can invest in like an external vendor. It's hard to just hire someone as a business owner when you don't really understand it that much and when you don't really have the budget yet to be able to afford it. And then you end up cutting corners or hiring people that aren't qualified. That's usually where a lot of these issues I see come from. Totally. Is where, the business owner almost has to figure out, get competent enough where they could at least get some of the growth happening and then bring in someone who can really amplify it. So it's interesting with your targeting too with clients. You found a kind of a similar thing with kind of a sweet spot at a certain size.
Yeah, it's a grind. I mean, there's that chasm where between starting and having enough to outsource your marketing that is just a grind. You know, you have to learn all these different skills. This is, of course, also assuming they're not starting their company with a bunch of money set aside, right, to compete in this arena. That's a different story. That's the whole point. That's the whole reasoning that you need to get to that couple million, you know, in revenue point. But that chasm is difficult, you know, and you just get worn out if you're not, if you don't have the skills to get past that point quickly enough. Then, yeah, I mean, it's exhausting. You know, it's tough.
Yeah, there's no other way to say it, really, because that's the point I've been at. I'm getting a little bit bigger where I can bring in different pieces and different people to help support, but I've had to learn pretty much everything and get good enough to at least like push things forward, and then with my agency, and then start to bring in some help as we kind of grow and then revenue goes up. So I think it's something a lot of business owners don't think about, especially when you're bootstrapping, you're just funding it yourself. You don't have, tons of money to invest. You really have to, push things forward as like the founder, and then see where, you can get some time back and start putting those pieces together. And then as you grow, you could actually bring in an agency, a vendor, consultant to take you to the next level. So awesome, man. I think we covered a lot here. So excited about this framework. I think people are going to get a lot of value out of it. Where can people find you? Where are you most active?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is usually, I don't post often, but I do try to provide some value there once in a while. So it's just linkedin.in/ or linkedin.com/in/ Andrew Peluso. I got lucky and was able to snag my name. So.
Nice. Yeah, we'll link to in the notes here in the description Andrew's LinkedIn, and then both of his agencies. You guys want to check them out. Pesty and then Bananas Marketing. Check out it. We'll link to both of his websites, and we'll be giving away this deck and the template in the newsletter. So, Andrew, thanks for hopping on. I think this was a good one.
For sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.